Righty-ho, we'll go for there. Thanks very much indeed, and welcome to all the Auckland Beekeepers Club members who have dialed in for this webinar. This is a first for us, so please forgive us as we get a head around the technology and so forth. And thanks very much indeed to Dave Hendricks and also to the University of Auckland for allowing us access into their webinar software to be able to run this meeting online in obviously what is our current COVID-19 lockdown situation. Steve Leslie speaking. I don't have a camera on my PC, so you've simply got a name up there and you're spared my grinning face. But today we have on these talks and on this webinar session, we have Lisa, Kim and Carol, who are going to be our panel and giving presentations on topics as we sent out in the invite the other night. Topics, as always, relevant to this particular time of the year. And Dave Hendricks will be managing the webinar from in the background, and will also in a couple of minutes come on and just give you a little bit of a chat about how you'll be able to put questions in, how you can respond to what's going on and things like that. So my thanks to everybody who's put this together in double quick time this week to enable it to happen, and just a couple of general admin and bits and pieces before we launch into the talks and discussion. Obviously, our meeting today has been cancelled in the light of the lockdown, and our meeting next month in May simply has a question mark alongside it at this stage. We don't yet know what's going to be happening in terms of the government loosening regulations and controls around the lockdown and movement and meetings. And we don't know whether they'll go to level 3, level 2, what that will mean on a practical sort of side. So at this stage, obviously today's meeting being held via webinar, next month's meeting, watch this space, we'll let you know as soon as we know sufficient there as well. We have sent out in the meeting invite the note that the beginners courses for both April and May have been cancelled. Simply too much uncertainty or inability to be able to meet for the course. So at this stage, we will reschedule those till later on in the year, and we will amend the systems accordingly. You can either get a refund, or you can get your attendance on that course transferred over to one of the later courses in the year. Just let us know what it is you want done around that. One thing to reassure you is that the apiary hives are being looked after while the lockdown continues. Beekeeping is defined by the government as an essential service, and although we are not commercial operators, one of the clauses within that essential service is the ability to maintain health and safety in the beehives, and therefore the club's hives at the apiary are being maintained within the regulations, both of the lockdown and also to ensure that autumn varroa treatments, wintering down, everything like that is being carried on as per normal. And so your committee are looking after the apiary hives, but by all means come back to your hive team leader or Karen and if you want particular information or you have concerns or questions, or there was something that you're aware of from previously. So apiary hives are continuing to be looked after. And obviously also your own hives at home, or if you have them in a remote location, also need to be looked after. And as I said, the regulations permit us from a health and safety point of view, that is the health and safety of our bees and our hives, to be able to carry on work to travel to the location of those hives if they're not on their own property, and to be able to carry out the work there, provided of course that we maintain social distancing, good safe distance between any people, cleaning of equipment, things that we touch, not just handing things off between one and another. And we are doing this exactly down at the apiary as well. If there happen to be more than one of us down there at any time, we are maintaining good, safe social distancing. I hope also that all the members of the club are safe and secure in your own homes, because obviously that's your first concern. Look after yourself, look after your family, and stay safe and stay sound and so forth at home. I don't know about you, but I'm having to do more cooking than I ever have for quite a long time. Lack of availability of a nice easy curry from the local Sandringham Indian shops and so forth down there means I'm doing lots of experimenting. So you've probably cleaned out the kitchen cupboards 3 times already, and everything else as well. Look after yourself, look after your hives, and look after obviously your family and those who your neighbours and so forth as well. We've been having street meetings with my neighbours and getting out and going for a walk and so forth. So look after each other and those who might be living alone or more elderly and vulnerable. Righty-ho, I think that's probably all I need to say, and let's hand over to the panel, and we'll start off with Kim, I think, for wintering down. Thank you.
Just before we start, I wanted to mention about questions. Any questions you guys have in the Q&A section, write your question. If you think it's a good idea, other people give it a thumbs up, and those questions will bump to the top of the queue. And at the end of the 2 presentations, the panel will endeavour to answer as many of those questions as we can. The idea of the questions is to for beginner beekeepers to ask as many questions as they can around what they need to know going into winter. And also maybe issues that they've had through the season. We may not answer all questions because obviously we are time bound, but whatever we don't answer online, we will take offline, come up with an answer, and then send that out to the members after the fact. Keep it kind. We've never done this before, and technology is always a challenge. And let's rock and roll. Cool. So I'll hand over to Kim.
Hey, thanks. So this is a first for me as well, talking to a screen. Hope I get it right, so bear with me. I've got a video presentation, a PowerPoint presentation I should say, that's going to work alongside me, so hopefully this happens as well. Today I'm actually got a few subjects to talk about, and I'm going to start with drones. So let's see if Dave can get our first screen up. So I'm starting with drones because I believe they help in reading the hive. They're going to help with the seasons as well. We know that drones start appearing in spring. They're there for one purpose, to visit the queen, a virgin queen up in the air. And otherwise, all the other times, all the workers are busy looking after them, feeding them, cleaning them. And yeah, it's a bit of work looking after those boys. So the boys themselves don't do any work, they just eat. By autumn, the girls are realising they can be a bit of work, and it's time to escort them out. All their stores and hard work they've done storing all the honey for winter, they don't want to be feeding to the drones. They want to be in the hive for their own survival. So it's been interesting this season. I noticed that drones can stay in a hive up to about May. This year with our season, we've had a very dry summer. We've had little moisture go into the ground, and these things can affect our bees and what nectar they are collecting and what pollen they are collecting. So with that in mind, they start thinking about removing or escorting these boys out because they are going to need feeding. So I start seeing things happening in a hive, closing down the bees themselves, the workers themselves, closing down a hive by when they're escorting the drones out. This week I've been working on a few hives, and I've noticed that most of the drones now already left the hive, so it's nearly an all-girl domain. So that's one of my first readings of a hive. The reason you might still see a lot of drones in a hive could be that the hive is nice and strong. It could have been a swarm that established itself a little bit later in the season, and so the numbers are a little bit different to an ordinary colony that's gone and built up spring, summer, and then eases down. With a swarm, it starts a little bit later and it eases down slower. Honey and pollen, if there's still a lot of honey, nectar and pollen coming into a hive, then the drones could stick around for a little bit longer. So that's one reason, but also if you're seeing a lot of drones in a hive, it could be because the hive is actually weak of workers, and they can't, they haven't got the strength or the ability or the need or the energy to escort those bees out, those boys out. So what is happening to the girls? Are they healthy? That's one of the other things then I start reading in the hive. It also could be, if you're seeing a lot of drones, there could be a drone comb in the brood area. So it's a good time to start looking at those brood combs and seeing if there's a big patch of drone comb, and maybe moving out to the side and getting rid of it later on in winter. So the queen isn't looking at that cell and saying, oh, I'll lay another drone. You could have lost your queen, and so a worker has started laying. So you're getting drone cells, drone laid in worker cells. So again, looking at your brood and seeing what's happening. And of course, one of the other things is a failing queen. So we need to start looking at our comb and what's happening there, which leads me on to the next slide. And I am going to see if I can get it. There you go. It's a little bit slow, and if I can't do it, David's going to do it for me. Right. So thanks, Dave. What I'm seeing here is that I've got honey and up the top. I've got some I've got some brood, capped brood, and I've got a little bit of nectar coming in. So that's good. The bees are still able to get a little bit of food. So that's nice. And I'm seeing capped brood. I aren't quite going to look at this frame to see if I can see eggs and larvae, but interesting enough, let's look at queens. So let's have a look and see if I can get onto a queen. My laptop is very slow at communicating, so I'm going to have to rely on Dave. So queens can come in all sorts of colours. I really enjoy looking at the different colours I see in a queen. A couple of these we haven't got here in New Zealand, one down the bottom and in the middle, but I just love looking at the colours that queens can be, all right, that can reflect the genetics in a hive. And over time, introducing a queen, you could completely change the genetics of a hive. So autumn is a good time to re-queen, but it would need to be a mated queen. These are the best ones at this time of year because our drones are already disappearing. So don't start thinking about raising some queens yourself or having the bees, if they've become queenless, raise a queen, because it's very unlikely she's going to have any successful mating. So we also know that the queen is going to keep the colony alive in winter by the bees, by the eggs she's producing, which will produce the healthy bees for our winter colony. So looking at that, we now need to look at the queen. Is she healthy? Is she laying a good steady rate of eggs? Well, not a good steady rate because we're reducing down, but is she laying the eggs? Are they eggs going to be workers and worker cells, or are they going to be drones and worker cells? Maybe then she is failing, and we don't want her to go through winter as a failed queen. The other one would be, is she being affected by a virus such as sac brood? So she won't recover from that herself. Maybe your hive has had a lot of varroa, a lot of PMS. Did that varroa and PMS, once you've been healing it, affect the queen as well? So you've got a good chance now to put in a new mated queen right now before we get into next month, because that queen, if she is affected by the virus, might not survive and come through winter either. So the queen, she's going to continue laying if we can get her fed well and she's getting groomed and she's warm. All right. Some queens in the middle of winter don't lay anymore. She goes down to a nice cluster related to the temperature and the food that's surrounding her, such as carniolas. They're known for that. Italians, they quite often go through. So I'm just going to get Dave to go through a couple of slides for me. Thank you, Dave. So there's our queen. She's surrounded by her workers. Everything's happening. She's getting kept warm, she's getting groomed, and she's going to be fed. That's what we want the workers to be able to do. So they need to be healthy to do those jobs. Let's look at a frame, Dave. Sorry about the delay here, folks. I can't get it happening. Okay, so we've got our frame of capped brood here. That's a nice, strong laying pattern there. So that's looking good. Wow. The thing is that those are they all healthy in that cell, in those cells, under those cappings? Let's hope so. Let's look at that in a minute on Varroa. But they're going to need to be emerging and being fed. So again, let's look at our stores for them later. All right. So we don't want to have them all emerge and then there's no food for them all. So we'll look at that in just a minute. But now I'm just going to start looking at where I want that brood to be. All right. So maybe you've had a hive that's 3 boxes high, no queen excluder in. That brood, and with the cold, that'll be moving up. The queen moves up to where the heat is. So the brood could move up to where the heat is too. So if you open up a hive, and I'm going to go into this next photo. If you open up a hive and it's 3 boxes high and you open your first box and, oh, I've got bees on it. That's great. There's honey there. And then I go down to the second box. Oh, I've got bees and I've got brood there. The bees are covering the brood. That's great. But the bottom box is empty of bees and there's no brood. That's not good because it means they can't guard an entrance. It's good for the brood because it's moved up where the heat is, but it's not good for the entrance where the guard bees are going to have to protect from predators. All right. So let's take that box away. All right. Let's take the brood, and we know the bees are going to cover the brood because they want to keep it at 34 degrees. They're going to cluster there. Let's take that cluster and move it down, that brood down towards the entrance. All right. That's what I like to see. So looking at this photo, let's assume now we've gone to 2 boxes. So the top frames are going to be honey and a bit on the outside, and it might have a little bit of brood in the middle. And the bottom frames are covered with bees now, and that's where I want my brood to be, by the entrances. So this is a Langstroth. This can also apply to a worry hive. And if you've got a top bar or a long hive, again, you want that brood to be near the entrance holes, right? So that's going to be covered by bees. And any honey stores is going to be away from an entrance hole, right? So further away, behind the brood, always behind the brood or above the brood from the entrance. So that's sort of a quick rundown of what I like to see where the frames are. So the next one I'm going to be reminding you of is that we actually do need to check our bees and inspect our bees and opening up a hive. So this time of year, there's a lot of robbing, and I know Lisa's going to talk to that a little bit later on, but for me, this is what I do. So I'm just going to see if I can get this. Dave, I might need your help again, sorry. Just not going over. So we've got Dennis inspecting a hive here. When I open up a hive at the moment, I keep the inner lid or hive mat on the top box, and I put that to the side. And then any other box that I need to take off, or half a box, I cover right over with a damp cloth. But I'm wanting to check the brood. It's really important now that that brood is healthy. Especially the capped brood. That's going to tell me a lot. The cappings on the brood is going to tell me a lot. And I need good healthy brood being produced now so that they will keep the colony warm and fed and cozy through winter. They're actually going to live longer. The bees that emerge from those cells are going to live longer. They're going to be living for 4 to 5 months. So, in this time of year, it's also a really good, important time to start inspecting that brood. And we're going to do AFB checks now. So I still can't get the cursor to work. Sorry. Dave, I need you to go on to the next one. All right. So the 2 photos I have put up here is, up the top is some bees emerging. All right. So those are chew holes made by adult bees coming out of their cells. The bottom right photo though, those chew holes that you see, there's a couple, or there's 1 or 2 there, they are made by adult bees, worker bees, nurse bees that are on the frame, and they've smelt something is wrong in that cell. So they've chewed a hole and they're investigating it. Right? So those need to be investigated by you too. Right? I can actually also see another one in the middle that's probably showing me a bit of Varroa PMS, and I can see one to the left of that towards the top. Let's see if I can get this going. Oh no, I can't. Towards the top, that looks like a little bit of chalk brood. So these cells now need to be investigated a little bit more, right? And they're telling you things that are happening in the hive. Well, I'm going to try and go on to the next slide myself. Good old technology. No, not happening, Dave. Can I go on to the next one? All right. So while we're waiting to go on to the next one, I just want to remind you of something here, that these frames of brood are going to be covered by bees, right? So we need to start thinking about that. Here's our bees on our frame. What can you see wrong? Can you see anything? Is there anything of interest? All right, bit hard. I'll tell you where there's a cell. Right up the top, towards the right a little bit. All right, so right up the top, there's a cell that has got some chewed cappings. To your left a little bit, Dave. Yeah, that's the one. So that's telling me something. Now, I look into that cell and I first look to see if it's white or it's dark coloured. So if it's white, it might be related to Varroa. The bees have smelt that. But if it's a dark colour, it needs further investigation. Is it going to be AFB or maybe something similar like sac brood? So that was okay. We saw that one cell. But if we shake the bees off the frame, we can start seeing a whole lot more. And I'm going to get Dave to go on to the next one. So now we've shaken the bees off. Now I can see a whole lot more things happening. These all need investigating. All right. They're really showing me that the bees have said there's something wrong here. Now they were strong enough still to be able to cope with uncapping those. And if we weren't there the right day, they'd probably take off whatever content out and get rid of it out the entrance. But they've left us some telltale signs. And the next one shows us the same scenario. And I'm just going to get Dave to go on to that one. Thank you. Sorry about this, folks. It takes a little bit to go to the next one. All right. This is quite interesting. Here's one that was chewed, but it's got white inside, sort of an off-white. That was just where you had the cursor, Dave, just in the middle there. Oh, I can't. Yep, that one. That's showing me that that's probably Varroa. But just below that to the right, bottom right, is something that's slumped. So that's showing me other signs I need to investigate. And purely just me looking at that is already showing me AFB. All right, it's got, it's slumped in the cell, it's got coffee colours, and you could do the roping test. To the left of that one, that white one above, that's got a sunken look to it with a chewed hole. So that could be uncapped too, and you could perhaps check what is underneath that. to do that uncapping, you need to do it very gently with a match. So if we look at the next slide, Dave, thank you. You're going to see something that is under those cappings. And under those cappings, I can now see what is, we know for sure, a definitive of AFP, and that's the two tongues. We've got a tongue in the middle with the brown stickiness to it, and we've got a tongue down the bottom with a dried content back down to scale with it. So to know more about AFB, just go to the afb.org.nz website. There's courses, unfortunately, that have been put on hold due to the virus, and we do have refreshers throughout the year as well. So once we're back up doing normal things, those courses will happen again. So the next thing I want to do is just remind you of Varroa. We've hopefully all been treating for Varroa at the moment, and some of us have put our first treatment in. You need to go back and just check that that's worked. You don't really need to check that that's working. So I'm just going to say, good old Varroa book, it tells you everything. I hope that you've got that in your library, and you've got some reading time now. So investigate it more. It might open you up into other options of Varroa control. All right. And that's what it needs to be. You need to be alternating your Varroa control. You need to be trying different things. So very quick reminder there on that Varroa management, because I know that we're getting through time very quickly. So I'm going to keep going with that, Dave. If we can go on to the next one. So a good old classic example of deformed wing virus. This is a symptom of Varroa PMS. So if you don't treat your Varroa or get the numbers down, this is what you start seeing from now to when you lose your colony in the middle of winter. So to address this, it does need to be now. All right, you really need to get onto it now so that you do get these healthy bees emerging without these viruses that are going to keep the colony fed, warm, and survive winter. When you've got to this stage, unfortunately, it can take several months to recover. So reduce them down nice and tight. So I'm going to look at a couple of things like hive temperature and moisture, and that goes back to Dennis, that's opening up the hive. When I'm looking at a beehive colony from now on, I do my visits very, very quickly. I don't take, because the colony has kept that brood warm. They've generated heat by using these stores to generate heat to keep it at 34 degrees. And then you open the lid and you take it off. That heat goes out the door. So do it on a sunny day. Check your bees on a sunny day when they're in the late afternoon, in case you stimulate robbing, and do it very quickly. The hive temperature around the colony needs to be 34 degrees. It can be cooler on the honey supers, for instance, or the honey frames, I should say. It can be down to about 20 degrees. But we really need to keep the temperature up inside that colony. So reducing a hive wear right down is the key to it. All right, to the house that is going to keep the warmth in there. All right, we don't want lots of space. It's like us. If we've got lots of space around us and we've got a little fire in the corner, that fire isn't going to generate all the heat, but that fire in a little room is actually going to generate the heat a lot quicker and spread the heat, and everything's going to stay warmer in that little room. So Dave, I'm going to skip the next slide because I don't think that's going to actually come up too good anyway. You might see it, but this was an example. You hopefully do see it. This is an example of what happens in a colony in the numbers. And it's an example of a normal beehive colony and a swarm colony. But thanks for going back to it very quickly. And you can see the number of differences there. So that can play on how quickly or slowly we close down our hive. Because if it's been a swarm that built up later, it's going to be a swarm that reduces down a bit later as well. So let's go on to the next slide anyway, Dave, because we're going to run out of time and we need to get on to robbing and questions. Thanks for that. So at the moment, we could have had a colony that built up over spring and summer into 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 boxes. We don't want to, it doesn't remain like that. The bees with the food reduction, the nectar and the pollen, they start stimulating the queen into stopping her and reducing her colony size, her laying pattern. So they've all got all this space now, but they're only maybe 3 boxes high, 3 boxes of bees, or even 2 boxes of bees. Take those boxes away. Storage, there's lots of options of storage, and because we're running out of time, I'm not going to go into storage too much, but be careful of wax moth. Don't forget wax moth, and don't forget rats and mice. And also, as I mentioned earlier, that colony will go up. Heat rises in a stack of hiveware, so the colony will go up. Get it back down. So going on to that next slide is going to be a typical example of what I've done with my hives now. They're down to 2 boxes, most of them. In fact, 1 or 2 of them are even 1 box because they suffered a bit with varroa and maybe the queen is old, etc., etc. But what I'm doing is reducing them down. It doesn't matter if they go right down to a bit of a traffic jam going into the hive. And reducing it down again can be in any form. And I mentioned it earlier, it can be in the long hive by moving the end bar back. You take some of those frames away that had honey on them. Those frames, I should say, bars that had comb on them. You take them away. You use your wax. They don't need it. You only keep top bars, comb in there that are covered with bees, and bring your honey forward to, if you are going to have some honey stores, forward to where the brood is. Same with their wonderful worry hives. They're going to be reduced down, and they've got that wonderful insulator up the top of straw, so that's going to break the cold between the outer lid and the hive mat. So that reminds me, I actually start doing that with my inner lid and hive mats. I've got things like hessian in there, newspaper in there, polystyrene, whatever was lying around has gone into whatever hives I've got about the place. So that's a nice thing that you can do. Moving along, we'll keep moving along. We'll go through these several slides that are coming up now. We're going to go through them very quickly, Dave. So here's a typical one, closed down. I put an entrance reducer on as well. So that's actually, we're going to have a photo of that shortly, I think. That's gone on. There's a lot of bees that have to go in that small narrow door. That's okay. What we want is them to all fit in at night and all be warm. So again, here's some more examples. These are all different heights. There's no rule to it. It's about reading the size of your colony and what they require. All right? You don't all have to house your hive in a double brood box. If it only requires 1, that's okay. Now this shows me when I open the lid that there's a lacking of bees. Maybe I don't need as many boxes, right? But there's still bees covering the frame, so that's really good. Let's look at the next one. This looks better because what you're going to see is bees on top of the frames when I open the lid, and hopefully Dave can do this pretty quick for me. There we go. So I like that look a bit better. All right. And the next one is still good as well. We've got bees on the frames right out to the outside wall. So I like those kind of things. These are the kind of things I like to see to have my hive or colony closed down to. Uh-oh. I don't like this one, though. So it might have been a failing queen. It might have been attacked and robbed. It might have been a varroa. But this hiveware is too big for the colony. So if your colony is looking like this in a single box, or it could be a double box, if it's a double box, take the good frames with brood and honey down to just 1 box. Right, so you can start manipulating your frames. You want things to be hunkered down, nice and cozy. So reduce your hiveware, reduce your space. That will get those bees recovering. And if the bees were affected by varroa, you get them nice and warm, the queen can start laying again. Right, she will do it. She won't do it if it's cold. So I'll keep moving with this one. We can combine colonies. All right. So if this colony was as weak as it is, and next door I've got a nice strong hive, how about putting that weak cold one onto my strong hive? You can do that in many ways. You can do that by combining and keeping your queen. So you could put your strong hive down the bottom, put a queen excluder in, put a sheet of newspaper in, put your queen excluder in, and then put your weak colony above that. So maybe you run 2 queens for the winter. Or if that queen is looking very weak and you do love your nice strong hive and the queen in there, you could cull your weak queen. She's being affected by viruses. And again, newspaper method, box, newspaper, other box of the weak colony on top, and the bees will eat through. But ultimately what we want to do is be nice and cozy for winter, as Pow Pow is. All right, that's what we want for winter. We want to be going in, reduce space. That's what we want our girls to be, our workers, and our queen, and the few drones that are in there to be enjoying. So a couple of things I just want to remind you of is wax moth. Okay, wax moth are going to enjoy any space that you have in your hiveware as well. So they're going to enjoy the storage frames. Again, remember, look up or find out how you can store your frames safely. They're going to be looking for pollen stores mainly, but they will attack wax frames as well. So how are you going to take out those old pollen frames, cull them back, clean them up, store them, and then put them back later in spring? It's interesting. I've got a couple of facts of wax moth, actually. I'm just going to quickly go through. Eggs hatch after 5 to 35 days. Larvae can take 20 days to 5 months before they go into the next stage, and pupae can take as long as 8 days to 2 months to hatch. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's all right. I've got plastic frames, and they'll just clean up those plastic frames for me. What happens is they have to go through that pupaing stage, and guess what? They can eat into your hiveware. So these ones are pupaing on a frame. So again, what can happen if you don't reduce a colony? This wax moth will establish itself in perhaps that bottom box, which has no bees on and no brood on. They're going to have a field day with that. But what happens, they start taking over the whole hiveware, and then the bees are under stress. They're going to abscond from that. And that's not a good thing at this time of year. So clean up your wax moths, store them away. There's all sorts of things. You can put the frames and extra frames into a freezer, or you can create a cold airflow. That's the best recommendation I have for you there. The next lot I have for you is very quickly a reminder again of what have we got on? What have we got next? Entrance reducers. Yes. So this is looking lovely. We've got a few bees coming and going, but the thing is, we could have predators coming and going too. So entrance reducing is really important at this time of year. Those guard bees, wherever they are, can't guard that whole entrance. Right, so get the entrance right down to a couple of spaces. Now there's on your left, you're going to see a entrance reducer has got a couple inches wide, and then flip it over and it's got just 1 bee space wide. Gauge the population of your colony to see which entrance you need in some way. But all you really want to do is have a few bees right. If you look into that entrance, you're going to see those bees poking their heads out. They're the guard bees. Those are what we want to see there. So even on the bottom right one, on the right hand photo, there's a few guard bees looking to see, right, are you wanting to come in? Well, I just got to check your pheromones that you're the right bee for this colony. You're not a robbing bee. All right. And of course, we have a big problem coming up with wasps. All right. So very important to guard against that. And I think Lisa's going to show you a couple of tricks for that one. This is another tool. This one is a hive gate. Very good. This is the entrance here. So really, wasps, for instance, they hate tunnels. And robbing bees aren't going to want to go through a tunnel into a colony either. So entrance reducer. And this one's great because the bees go through here and they come out here. And that's going to be under the brood, all right, because we've moved our brood down. So that's about it from me. I hope that helped. I hope our bees are going to be nice and healthy for winter. Yeah, good luck.
Cool. Thank you very much, Kim. That's awesome. Give me a second. I'll get Lisa going.
Thanks, Dave.
Hopefully I can make it work.
Winter feed. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming today. As was said in the beginning, this is the first time we've done this, so please bear with us, and we'll all get through it successfully. Right, my first thing on the list here is to continue on from what Kim has said, and that's about robbing. Of course, our threats with robbing are predominantly bees and wasps. They are the main threats, but there can also be mice, rats, you know, all those sorts of things. So take that into consideration. But in terms of robbing can start when a hive is open too long, as Kim has already said. So if you are going into your hives, make sure that you keep them covered either by using hive mats or damp cloths like towels or sacks to reduce the smell that goes out from the hive as you're doing your inspection. And Kim shared with me yesterday that bees can smell hives that are open from 1 kilometre away. I didn't know that, so I learned something yesterday, so that was really good. When a colony or hive is weak, it's really hard for the guard bees to actually protect it. So the wasps and the other bees from other colonies will target those hives. And if those hives have got AFB or lots of roe, then they're taking that back to your hive. So it's really important that you reduce the possibility of anything that's a threat to your hive getting in there. And the other thing which I also learned this year was when boxes are rotten, the bees can obviously get in. The bees that are not your bees can get in. And the best thing you can do with that box is, if you can't fix it, put it on fire, because it's only going to cause you problems. In terms of robbing, a tip that I'd like to share with you is when you take your supers off, which you've already done. So if you've done your harvesting, when you take them off, that's when you do a good time to reduce your entrance, and that will avoid the robbing as much as possible. The entrance reducer that Kim showed you just at the end of her talk, I've got that on 3 of my hives, and that has that's been wonderful. It really has. I've had them on since we saw them at the club some time ago. The other thing that well, Kim's already told you about inserting the wooden pieces in with the reduced entrance, so the guard bees can defend the entrance much easier. And we all have our favourite things that we use. What I've got, or what Dave's brought up for me here, is a robbing screen, which I also have on all of my hives as well. And what this does is fool the robbing bees or wasps into thinking they know how to get into the hive, because they go straight for the screen because they can smell the honey, but they don't know that up the top is where the actual entrance is. And I leave these on all year round, so it becomes part of the hive. It's part of the entry and exit part of the hive for the colony, and it's quite interesting to watch the bees, how they set themselves up for coming and going based on this system. Right. So no, don't go there. Go back, Dave. So we're going to move on to feeding, and the first question is when to feed. Sorry, I've got lots of notes here. Okay, now we'll start here. Okay, right. So like all things in beekeeping, there is no one size fits all. There are guidelines which we have all read and refer to when we are unsure. These are based on seasons, the seasons and experienced beekeeper advice, books, etc., and the internet. But everything we do will depend on the colony we are caring for and what we are seeing at that time. So to feed or not to feed will depend on the current condition of the colony, of your colony, the size of the colony, and how much honey you have taken off the hive during harvest time. And also remember that if you take off too much at once and you leave nothing for the bees, it can actually send them into a panic and actually cause them to go out and do robbing as well. So they sort of have this dearth response and start robbing other hives. So leave your bees some honey is the lesson there. Okay, it will also depend on your local climate. In Auckland, we seldom have very low temperatures compared to the deep south or some inland areas. We certainly don't have to contend with snow or -0 temperatures, so there are days the bees will be able to get out to have a cleansing flight, and in some areas even do some foraging. Because most of our hives are in the cities and most of us have these beautiful gardens around us, I know in my garden I always make sure that I have lots of bee-friendly plants in the garden so that the bees, if it is a nice sunny day, they can come out and have something to do. But back to when to feed. If you believe that the bees come first, then you will never harvest all the honey frames on your hive. So you would not need to feed, as you would have at least 15 to 20 kgs of honey for the bees to have over winter. Now that's a choice thing, but to me it's pretty logical. If you don't leave them enough food, they're either going to die or you're going to have to feed them. And if you haven't kept anything, if you haven't kept their honey for them, then you're going to have to feed them sugar, which is not as good as their honey. So I suggest that you place the winter honey frames above a hive mat which has a small oval hole in it towards the back, so the bees can get access over the winter, but the brood and nest is contained in a smaller space so they can maintain that heat. For me, because I use oxalic acid as my form of treating, this makes the treatments actually more effective if I feel I have to do any over winter. And my judgment call on that is basically if there's more than 10 mites on the mat when I do a 24-hour sticky board inspection, then I'm going to treat. Yeah, okay. Right, moving on. Why and what to feed? The reasons to feed. There's not enough resources or honey collected by the bees before they go into cluster. You have not left enough honey frames for the bees to overwinter, or for whatever reason you made that choice. And the other reason that I've got is to promote the health of the bees going into winter. Promoting the health of the bees option, regardless of what your stores are on the hive, I feel is a good place to be. This will let the bees, it will set up the bees physically for winter, but not overstimulate them into thinking there is a nectar flow on. This can be achieved by adding a pre-prepared tea for the bees to your honey or sugar syrup. Coming to the syrups, winter sugar syrup is usually a 1-to-1 mix. You can see all of the different types of mix in your practical beekeeping book, so refer to that, and you will that will help. You can use, as we know, many of us know, white sugar is White sugar is what you use for your syrup, but you can use raw sugar as well. I was informed today. No other sugar, not brown sugar, because that will give them diarrhea. And caster sugar is easier for the bees to take down and to wet. So if you're sprinkling that on the top and between the frames, and Carol or Kim can tell you more about that later on. So moving on to the next slide, please, Dave. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about now is the tea for bee recipe that I use in the autumn. So it's equal parts of oak bark, horsetail, and valerian root. So those are so I've taken these photographs yesterday. So I've got oak bark in the top left, valerian root underneath it, and horsetail tea in the middle. So equal parts of that. The reason why I use these particular ingredients, oak bark has been known to be a natural antibiotic and controls fungi. Horsetail contains silica, which strengthens the bee's overall health and is said to lessen the impact of electromagnetic fields. And valerian root controls stress and stinging behaviour in the bees. Where I learned about these ingredients was from, I know it's back to front, but sorry, Harmonic Farming for Bees by Werner Geisig. He was somebody that came and talked to us a few years ago, and is very much into biodynamic farming and beekeeping. So this tea is what he's been using with his bees for many, many years successfully. So to make the tea, you place a teaspoon of each of the oak bark, horsetail, and valerian root for every 1 litre of water into a pot and bring to a short boil. And then remove from the heat and let it stand 3 to 5 minutes so it can brew, just like making a cup of tea. Then you strain it off and you make up your sugar syrup, or if you're using your honey, then you make honey syrup. But remember, only use the honey from that hive. Do not mix your honeys across different apiaries or hives. So what I recommend is, where possible, even if you do take all the honey off your hive, and that's your choice during your harvest, please reserve at least 5 kg as a supplement feed if required now or in the spring. And then you've got a backup and you won't have to use sugar. But if you haven't done this, then sugar syrup is what you have to use. But you need to make it as beneficial for the bees as possible. And one of the things from the research I've done is that if you add half teaspoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice to the mixture, that makes the syrup more digestible, similar to us using apple cider vinegar in drinks or cooking. A healthy pinch of sea salt for the important minerals that are in that. And so not iodized salt, it's mineral salt, sea salt. And 1 cup of chamomile tea, which turns the sugar syrup into a more nectar-like substance. You can use straight chamomile flowers if you want out of the garden, if you've got them, or you can use tea bags as I've got indicated in this slide. Right. So sorry, I've got to find my other notes. Yes. So how do you put these things on the hive? Well, you've got several options, and we've probably all got all of them in one way or another. But you can have an entrance feeder. The main drawback of using the advantages of using this is you can see when they've used it all. So you know exactly, you don't have to open the hive, you can put it in the entrance, you can reduce the entrance. It can form part of reducing the entrance, so you put that into the front door. So that's the advantages. The disadvantages is the bees can smell it quite, you know, it's right at the front door. And as far as they're concerned, it's sort of like a free-for-all. So if you do use a front feeder, you have to make sure that the entrance is reduced considerably. Okay, so that's the front one. Internally, of course, you've got your frame feeder, which you put in the hive. And the advantages of that is they don't have to go very far. Make sure you put some bracken or some branches off a tree or something in there so they don't drown. Oh, something's happened. Don't know what. And if you need to refill this, instead of taking off all the boxes or the total lid, what I tend to do is just slide the top board over and just expose this so I can see what's in it, and then I can see what's in the frame feeder and fill it up if necessary. And it's also easy to take it out if you want to, but because if you don't take it out, they can make a mess in there as well. And finally, you've got your top feeder, of course, which you place on top of your hive, and they come up to the corners here. The corners here and get the nectar, or they could come up through the center here and get the nectar. And with this one, because they can't get into the space, they don't drown. But if you haven't got one like this and they can get up through the center, make sure you put something in here so they don't drown, so they can just walk on it. And the advantages of this one, of course, is that once again you're not going into the hive. You can check to see what how much they've taken down, and you're not taking that warmth away from the hive. Okay, I think that's about it, Dave.
Can you show the front feeder again? I made your screen bigger so people could see it.
Okay. There we go. So what that's got in it is, that's just a plastic jar, and I don't know if you can see the little holes in the lid, and then that goes in there with full of syrup, and I'll come back a bit, and that part goes into the entrance like that. Okay, ladies, have you got anything you'd like to add to that? Unmute yourself if you want to talk, guys.
Sorry, I'm busy answering some questions. So yeah, we've had a few come in, so that's really good. What was your question? You're muted.
Yeah, I am. Have you got anything more to add to the feeding or the robbing presentation?
Okay, just thinking of feeding and the frames and closing down your hive, I just want to go back to colony strength and colony size. You don't need to leave a whole box of honey on if you've only got half a box of bees and a colony. So a good idea is to have maybe them go into storage somewhere and feed them back to the bees. That would be something you could do with your frames, or you could put it, as Lisa says, I put it above my inner lid with a hole. I have a hole in the center. I put it above the inner lid, and it's stored there so the bees can go up through and access it if they need to. Or I put it above the top feeder even. But my top feeders, I don't have that center feeder guard on. I take that away so that the bees can go through that top feeder and then up into that box. So a little bit different, but it works for me. Feeding, yeah, I like to have bracken in mine, and yeah, if I can, sugar syrup back to them. There's lots of different options again. Again, that feeder needs to be near the bees. It's no good having the feeder. You've got your brood box and you've got your bees covering that brood, and then there's sort of this empty honey soup, not many bees on. Take the feeder down, so it is above, directly above all that bees and brood and everything, because then they'll access it. They will go and access it. But if it's a story above that, then they're not going to access it. So that's my rule there.
Okay, and what I also do with mine is I have a top board that'll either have a hole in the middle or small holes around the edges, and if the box where the majority of bees are, even if there are a few frames with honey on and bees, that goes actually above the hive mat with the holes in it so that the bees can get down, but it also means that there's less warmth being lost in the hive for any frames with honey on that could be used. It's also a great way that if I want to feed them, or I'm going to put anything down like sugar, that I can actually take that off and I can see how much sugar's gone down without actually having to go into the hive. So that's one thing I have on all my hives now. And I think with a worry hive that I've been looking after, what I've also done is get a small board introduced into there that has the corners cut off the edges so that the bees have a small entranceway, and that also gives me a way of feeding them, which they probably will be. They came from a small swarm late in January, so they probably will need to be fed, although 2 boxes are very full now with honey and bees.
Okay, it's time for the Q&A part of the Funny Farm show. So you guys can all see the questions there. I don't know if you just want to pluck stuff out of there. You've been answering them throughout the session, which is great. Now we got one up there saying...
Yes, I can start on one. Sarah's asked a question about a lot of wax moth and her stored supers, and Steve and Kim have both given answers. The one thing I would like to add to that is that, as a rule, if you have good quality frames that are only wax and there's absolutely no old brood cells in them or any pollen, as a rule, the bees don't do too much damage. So basically, I separate out my frames before I start, and quite often I'll even put older frames together just in case there's anything on that I can't see. That wax moths don't really eat wax, they actually eat other debris, so that's sort of a bit of a fallacy with the name. So basically I separate them out, and I think another thing that also works is if you get a rim or a shim that goes around the hive, you can actually put, not that we can buy it at the moment, but Bunnings have mesh screen that you can actually put onto fly doors. That kind of screen, that plastic screen, if you put that on top and bottom and then put that onto a brick, that means that there's air going through that those boxes all the time. So air is something else that also deters them, as Kim mentioned. And there was just one other thing about overwintering that I'd thought about that happened to me a couple of years ago. Every year when I go into winter, I check my hives for the level. Because one year in the garden, it's, you know, the legs were actually on earth that was getting softer at the back and it had a solid front. What had happened is the back of the hive had actually sunk into the earth a wee bit, and when I actually went in there and did an inspection, I could actually see there was a problem at the bottom, and there was actually water going in because the hive wasn't level. And if you've got a solid floor, that can be a bit of a problem. So make sure that your hives are level, or preferably up a tiny wee bit at the back, so that any water doesn't run into the hive and create a problem there with extra moisture, etc.
Okay, there's a question that I've just posed to Kim from Pauline regarding a disease question. If dead brood is brown but not ropey, question mark. You're muted. I knew it would happen.
AFB may not rope out depending on the stage that it's at, so you need to be aware of that. But Varroa at certain stages can be brown too. It's a different brown to American foulbrood, but brown there nevertheless. It will be a little bit more watery, okay? So you need to just check the consistency of that brownness. And if it's a really dark brown, heading towards coffee without milk, it could be a sack brood brown. So I again recommend going onto their AFB website, www.afb.org.nz, and that's got lots of photos to look at and PowerPoint presentations to guide you through. So that would be my answer.
Cool, thanks, Kim. There's one here from Helen saying, when you have time growing up the robbing screens, should the little entrance be up or down? You know that piece of wood that we saw that you showed us, Kim? You're muted again.
Muted again.
That's fun. I'll just keep it on, shall I?
Yeah.
You mean with the two different sizes, the entrance reducers?
Yeah.
So, well, of course, in summer you're going to have it wide open. There's going to be no entrance reducer there. But going down, closing down the hive, maybe it's a strong population, so you could have it a little bit wider, and in a month or two's time, go right down to the very narrow one, right? And block the other ones up. Look, I've got all sorts of entrance reducers on all my hives. It's whatever is around, actually. I don't have all those fancy wood ones. Or the lovely hive guard that Lisa's got. I've got bits of wood. I'm creating a tunnel effect. That's the key to it. I'm reducing an entrance, and the ones that don't belong, the ones that belong in the hive, they'll find that tunnel pretty quick. But anything else is going to be flying around and trying to look for the gap. So if you have a small gap with a whole lot of bees in front of it, they're not going to be able to get in. Right, so I gauge it, and it's just whatever is around at times.
Okay. And Dave, if it's Helen Ruston, that's the message you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if she's talking about the robbing screen that was in my picture, and she's talking about the smaller entrance, and that's what is displayed in that picture, there isn't an up and down. There's a one side or another side. So one side is a small entrance, and when you turn the screen around, the robbing screen around, it's the full top of the robbing screen, and so that's a fully open entrance. So hopefully that what's Kim said and what I've said helps her.
Okay, that's cool. Just to clarify for everyone, if we were talking earlier, there's always multiple ways of answering a question. So if you've asked a question and the panel or anyone has answered it in a way where you don't understand or we've taken the wrong approach, just email us back and we'll try and get that question answered correctly, or someone will give you a call. Yeah, cool.
Can I just bring up a couple of...
does anyone want to have a go at that?
What was that?
The top question from Tim Wilcox asking, I've seen a couple of well-formed pupa outside the warry in the last couple of weeks. What's that telling me?
Actually, have you closed it down too much and the brood might be a bit warm, or there's not enough bees to ventilate and air condition and control the temperature in a hive, so some of those larvae might have actually got too hot.
But she's saying pupae. It's like,
yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, pupae. So it's been capped,
yeah.
And I presume the pupae is white. So, you know, if it's too hot in there, if the bees aren't thermoregulating the hive properly, then they smell that pupae is cooked.
Oh, that's terrible.
So I'm just going to hold this up. Can you see that? All right. So if you have more than one big, oh, sorry, if you see that, if you have, I'll just hide my number. If you have more than one apiary and you want to go out and do some bee work in your other apiary, you can download this off the Appy NZ website, or you can email me and I can send you through the download of this, and you'd have that in your vehicle so that you can prove that you can go out on the road and you can still do your beekeeping. All right, so I have this in my car because I have, about 20 apiaries that I go and visit. Right.
And what
So
we can
really
do, if you send me the link, Kim, I can put that in an email out to all the members, because we'll probably go out and ask people what they thought of this webinar.
Yep, great, thanks. That's good time. The soil is starting to change. We're getting a bit of moisture in, so now is the time to plant for bees. All right, good time to start planting and thinking about your food stores for bees. So that's a little bit of a plus as well. Just trying to
Okay, well, we're 15 minutes past our finishing time, so I'm not sure whether you guys want to carry on and try and answer these questions, or we should wrap it up. It's entirely up to you.
Oh, there was one. Suzanne asked a question about robbing and what it looked like. I hope she was clear from the photographs she saw what it does look like. I mean, if you look at your bees every day and there's twice as much action happening one day, well, probably it is being robbed. The other thing is that I've found really useful on a really bad robbing situation is I always have my hose and a sprinkler setting on it. Excuse me, in autumn I have it in case the bees start robbing, because water will send them away and give you a wee bit of break to get the hive closed down as much as it can be. And it's also there in spring because it also stops bees from swarming. So that hose with a sprinkler system on it is really handy, both autumn and spring. So I hope your questions have been answered. And yes, the putting the grass into the entrance and letting the bees clear it out slowly is fine. However, once bees start robbing, it usually takes about 3 days for them to stop robbing once you've got a really bad robbing happening. So I hope that's of some help, Suzanne.
Okay, there's just a couple here from David Kennedy. He said, do I have the queen excluder on as well as the hive mat with the hole? So queen excluders can come off now. The queen's not going to be going up through boxes. She's going to be staying in a brood area. So she's not going to be going past those honey walls. And I call them honey walls because when she hits that honey, she goes, oh, can't be any further than that. So I won't go any further than that. I'll just stay within my nice little frames that are showing me brood chambers. All right, so take the queen excluders away now. There was another one here about top bars, the bars full of honey, and at the end, furthest away from the entrance, with partial old honey nearer and above the brood. So yeah, and any that is only just partly filled. How about taking those partly filled away, culling them out, and getting those nice capped bars of honey closer to the brood for the winter? Again, that's going to be your wall for the brood chamber.
And the other thing is, just adding on to that, Kim, is that quite often, even with your divider boards in a worry hive, there's usually a bee space enough for bees to get under. So I would probably leave those frames on the other side of your division board. The other thing I would also do is maybe uncap a few so that the bees can get in behind there and take that honey back into the hive proper.
Right.
There's quite a few questions around treatments in the list. I don't know if you guys want to have a quick talk about any of those. One about oxalic acid treatment once a week, and they're still seeing the occasional deformed wing outside the hive. What else can we do to prevent this?
The first thing I'd ask is, what are your mite counts? You know, are you doing mite counts? Are you seeing what your population of mites are in there? Because if you're seeing deformed wing virus, then your mite counts are high. and doing a treatment once a week with oxalic acid is not going to make this any. It's not going to fix it quickly. That's for sure. You probably, if oxalic acid is your choice of treatment, then you need to give them a blast. You need to treat. You need to do a treatment every 2 or 3 days, and you need to make sure that the space that the bees are in that you're treating, because you do just want to treat the with brooders, that is got a top board above the brood nest, so that you are targeting all of the bees. So hopefully you've taken your boxes down so that you're down to wintering down size, and then do a treatment 3 days for a week, and do a test. Do a mite count before you start that. So do like a sugar shake or a 24-hour mite drop on a sticky board. Anything else that's the main ones I know of for testing for varroas, ladies? Any other?
There's a similar question from Maggie regarding Apistan, but it's the same thing. 4 weeks after treatment, I'm still seeing bees with deformed wings crawling. Is it normal, or do I have to change the treatment?
I think I had started answering that. I might have lost the question. What's happened is when she put her treatment in, that capped brood that was present in the hive, the treatment doesn't infiltrate the cappings and doesn't affect the varroa in there. So that varroa would still have been feeding away on those bees that were going through the pupae stage. So they come out and they're wandering around the hive as deformed wings bees. So it takes a little bit of time for the varroa treatment to affect the varroa, and that's why it has to be in there for such a length of time, so it gets the varroa when it comes out of the cells again. But just keep an eye on your time frames, and maybe you have to go with another treatment. I'm treating about 3 different types of treatment from autumn right through to spring. And depending what it is, the oxalic for me, I like that in winter, and I'll do several treatments of that through winter. So I'm not just going for one type of treatment. I'm rotating and trying lots. But it does take time.
Yeah.
Pauline's posted a link in there about making your own robbing screens, so I'll take that link and send it out to the members as well.
Yep.
What else? Someone mentioned your lovely picture, Carol, saying it was very nice. I think that was Kay.
Thank you.
There's one question from an anonymous person. I forgot to unclick that button, but they've applied Max to treat for varroa on the hives. It's the top question. Anyone want to answer that?
What?
Sorry, could you say that question again, please?
I've applied Max to treat for varroa on all my hives, which require the entrance to be fully open. I have noticed there is a robbing frenzy going on. How do I manage this with the type of treatment I am using?
MAQS. What's that?
That's Mite Away Quick Strips.
Okay.
So formic acid.
They shouldn't make any difference.
Maybe we could take that one offline and have a think about it.
Okay.
It looks like more than just treatment things going on there.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously not enough bees to guard all that. That maybe they're being stressed within the hives, so maybe they actually need to reduce the whole colony down. I'm not sure how big it will be. So there's a few more questions around that. So yeah, maybe it has to be answered differently. Right.
Okay, I pretty much think we're getting to the dregs now of all our questions. We should probably wrap it up. I'll send a couple of questions out to all of the attendees just to get your feedback in terms of what you thought about this webinar, whether you thought it was useful, what we could improve on, what you didn't like so much. Yeah, that's all it. I'd like to thank Carol, Kim and Lisa for presenting today and giving us a bit of your knowledge. And yeah. Oh, and I'd like to put a shout out to Brendan and his little cat. I was supposed to have him on the screen today, but I forgot. So next time.
Oh, Tret!
Healthy.
Cool. Okay, guys. So thanks, everyone. Stay safe, be kind, and look after your bees, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dave, for setting it up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.